Everyone, this is the Vermont House Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. It is Friday, January 23rd, 2026 at 9:05 in the morning. So as our tradition is, on Friday mornings, we hear from our Eugene intern and our Norwich intern. So, you're gonna go first or? I can. Okay, great, and I'm assuming, okay. Very good.
All right, good morning. For the record, Cabot Sales, UVM intern. Again, I am reporting on the Senate Committee for Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. I'm going to go through day by day. Tuesday, they heard from the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Some of the notable discussions were on measuring impact. There were questions about the methods of tracking and measuring the impact of investments. The VHCB noted that they do not have a good method for tracking right now, but that's something they are working on to quantify the impact their investments are making. And the committee expressed confidence that they are having an impact, but they would like to see numbers on that. They also discussed wages and housing affordability, specifically discussing the relationship between wage growth and rising home prices. The VHCB highlighted the gap between the adequate wages earned versus or needed to afford a two-bedroom apartment versus what's actually earned, and that's $17 versus $29 an hour. So that was a topic of discussion. They also were discussing federal considerations, such as interest rate uncertainty, which is at the top of their list right now, and that federal contributions are still having a strong impact on the work that they're doing. So they're keeping a close eye on that. Moving on to the Chamber of Commerce, a couple proposals they had for the Home Act were for applications to lose points if their municipality had restrictive zoning laws relative to other applicants. And the committee was very positive about this proposal. They also discussed Act 181, and there's a concern that came up a few times throughout the week that towns were not opting in to Tier 1A because they would have to take on certain administration of Act 250 permitting requirements. And they discussed changing that from an opt-in to an opt-out for Tier 1A. Then they heard from Let's Build Homes. I won't give too much about that because you've already heard it. They discussed the same concerns about opting out of Tier 1A versus opting in. And then they also proposed, Let's Build Homes proposed waiving sales tax on construction materials for residential buildings, removing the cap on downtown and village tax credits, which I'll also discuss more a little bit later. That came up. And a one-time investment housing acceleration fund. Moving on to Wednesday for outdoor recreation. They reviewed the performance of grants for outdoor recreation, specifically the impact it's had on workforce development initiatives. They requested committee support for the allocation of $500,000 to the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, VOREC. That money is already there, but they just were asking the committee to support it. They discussed measuring ROI again. VOBA does have metrics for measuring ROI, though they did not specifically say what those were. And they said they would get back to the committee with reports because those are not public right now. Moving on to the Public Assets Institute. This was a presentation of data primarily focused on housing and healthcare. We're hearing similar things. Healthcare is the most expensive in Vermont out of all states. Housing prices are rising faster than income is rising. And Vermont has seen more productivity growth than income growth over the period that they were analyzing. Then they heard from the Regional Development Corporation. Legislative priorities from them included VEGI, Act 181 again, and Brownsfield, specifically requesting state money because it's more flexible for that. And then they discussed building standards. That was of interest to the committee, specifically that state building standards in Vermont are very different than what they are in surrounding regions, and figuring out how to create more consistency in building standards, especially in New Hampshire, which has much looser building standards than Vermont. Then they heard from the Vermont Downtown Program. This is where they discussed in more depth the Downtown Village Center Tax Credit Program. They've seen a 25-to-1 return on investment on those tax credits. And they discussed the cap, which is currently at $3 million on tax credits, because demand always exceeds this cap and they are seeing a good return on it. So they were questioning, why does the cap exist? And there was strong support for removing the cap altogether. They also discussed whether the application process poses barriers, and the program administrators noted that they consistently update the application process each year. So they're on top of that. Then they heard from the Vermont Businesses for Social Responsibility. This was mostly a general update and overview. The one notable thing from that was healthcare affordability, and they're noticing that businesses are choosing not to purchase group plans for healthcare coverage for their employees and leading them to the private marketplace, and that was a bit of a concern. And then Thursday, they were introduced two bills from Senator Andrew Perchlik. The first one was S-230, an act relating to flexible working arrangements. This just makes it so unless an employee's request to work from a flexible location impedes on operations or legal or contractual obligations to the business, then they must accept that. And then they also heard from Senator Perchlik S-270, an act relating to the right to charge electric vehicles at home. Yeah.
So he submitted, that would effectively make it so that the state and any company in the state would have to allow remote work. Is that what that bill does?
Correct. Yes.
So the state would be forcing businesses to do that. Are we even allowed to? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So from my understanding and what they,
Yeah, I do not stand well on
Yeah.
that.
yeah, the origin of this bill was the governor's order for state employees to return to office. This would affect both private and public sector employees. And yeah, the wording was, unless it's crucial to the business's operations or there's something in the employment contract that says they have to show up to work, then the employee has the right to work from home if they want. And the employer must accept that. So that is the wording.
Way to
Wow,
draw
that's
new
gonna-
employers. Way to draw new employers to the state. Huh?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, thank you for that. That's very interesting. Do we have a likewise bill here? We don't have one that's like that, right?
It would probably go to general, wouldn't it? Probably. Could come here, but probably would go to general. I don't know if there's companion though.
My guess is Scott will vote no on that.
And that's all I have for this week.
Thank
So
you.
Any other questions?
I am curious about that specific thing. Was there any testimony taken, and was it only the union that showed up and saying this is a great bill?
It was just the introduction from
Oh,
Senator Perchlik. That's it. I could pull it up and
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine. Huh.
Anything else? A nice conversation with your dad the other day.
glad to hear that. I tuned in to watch it.
All right, thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Haley? Morning.
Good morning, everybody. For the record, my name is Bailey Davis. I'm the Norwich intern. So for this week, I'm just going to be wrapping up some loose ends from last week in regards to CT educators. I know everyone here had a few questions. Of course, I wanted to get them some answers on that. So the first question, the first loose end I want to wrap up is in regards to licensure timelines. So I'm going to cover basically how we do it here in Vermont first, and then later on there's another question generally surrounding the requirements in other states and how they're addressing particularly the shortages in CT educators. So first and foremost, in terms of the licensure timeline, obviously, like I said last week, there's that work requirement. You have to have 6 years. If you have a high school diploma or a GED, you have to have 6 years in the actual working field, the technical field that you want to enter. With the associate's degree, that's a minimum of 4 years. So that's right off the bat, that's, you know, a timeline that's set to even enter, right? A barrier to entry in regards to just work experience. So, and then there's the multiple pathways. So like I talked about last week too, there's the apprenticeship program. There's the apprenticeship license where it's, you know, license you get if you can secure a job offer at one of the CTE centers in Vermont. So as I said last week, there's 17 CTE centers, each specializing in different fields. So a holder of that license would have to first secure a job offer from those particular centers, then go through follow-on training. And I think there's a question too about who these teachers work under, these apprentice license holders work under. So typically they're working under mentor teachers. So not just any teachers, specifically experienced teachers who have, you know, a wealth of knowledge and are sort of trained to really, you know, help these teachers get the qualifications they need. There's also a structure called the CTTEP, Career and Technical Teacher Education Program. That structures the training once they achieve this license into a 4-year program. And license holders must, you know, if you're going through the apprentice license process, if that's like the pathway you want to take, you must complete that program in order to obtain a permanent level 1 educator license. And that's done through places like, you know, the Vermont State University. They have programs for that. And then there's also a special program, which I'll get into next. It's called the Accelerated Alternative Pathway. So that allows individuals that have an undergraduate degree to become a certified educator. And then they can get that industry experience after. So it's just kind of a different pathway that prioritizes the education aspect first and then the technical experience after. So that timeline typically takes 8 months to 2 years. And like I said before, it just switches up the actual requirements as opposed to having industry experience first, then going into education, then going into industry. And so this the third pathway is actually an interesting one. So this timeline usually takes 6 months to a year. It's called the peer review pathway. And that's particularly for individuals with certain industry experience, particularly a lot of industry experience, but no traditional training in regards to, you know, teaching. So that requirement, they must demonstrate proficiency in Vermont's core teaching standards, and then pass the praxis core, and then pass a test in the specific CT endorsement, which is the praxis core 2. Which makes sure, you know, they know actually what they're teaching. So this is more geared towards people who have a lot of experience, and it allows them a pathway into being a CTE educator. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to go through a program. It just means they can demonstrate the actual skills they need. And so another question that you guys had was in regards to what other states have been doing to address the shortages in CTE educators. So for financial incentives is what I looked into first. In Maine, actually in 2021, passed a law that includes CTE educators in the qualification of teachers when it comes to minimum salaries. So what it allows is it allows for those CTE educators who otherwise weren't included in the classification of teacher to be included in you know, salary increases that goes along with the minimum of 40,000 currently in Maine. Then another interesting incentive is in Idaho. In Idaho, they implemented a career ladder system. So what this allows them to do is take people who have a lot of industry experience, and instead of starting them out as a, you know, a beginning teacher salary wise, it allows them to be placed in an upper ladder when it comes to salary. So it places them in people, maybe educators who've been around for, you know, 5-10 years, given that they also have experience. They also have, you know, that work experience. And I don't know if you guys have the handout or the my report, but it actually has the graph. But the whole idea behind this is people can transfer from their particular industry into being a CTE educator without taking a massive pay cut, which, is a good incentive for, particularly skilled people to go and teach the next generation. Another interesting proposal, and actually, well, it's now enacted, is in Kentucky. They use something called an adjunct certificate, which allows there to be part-time CTE educators, which means, like I said, for a lot of these, right, experienced industry professionals can teach part-time. They don't have to be full-time. And it also allows them to not necessarily obtain all the certifications, which of course addresses a shortage because they can go right into teaching. The requirements for this, however, they must hold either a post-secondary degree, associates or bachelor's, or have a significant amount of work experience. So, I mean, the whole real benefit of this is that people can, particularly with a lot of experience, can go immediately and teach part-time without giving up maybe their full career. They can work up to, I think, 69% of the days of the year maximum. And so, they can have both their career and also teach at the same time without having all those certifications, all that barrier to entry that otherwise they would have to go through. Now I'm going to open up to any questions if anyone has any.
Questions? Great, thank you for that research. That's very helpful. We don't have it yet. There's an issue with the system right now, but it'll be posted as soon as it is now. Oh, is it now? Okay, great. So we do have it. That's great. Thank you, Bailey.
Thank you.
Committee, any reports from committees you're shadowing?
I had a good conversation with Michael and digital infrastructure. Right now, it looks like Consolidated's wanting to get rid of their copper all the way out. There's a little concern about some people that may be left behind, that maybe don't have any other means of phone system.
So they're provider of last resort. So how do they get away from that?
Well, I guess it's going to be a phased situation where first they're going to remove the copper from places that have other means. It's going to be.
So does that mean that they're replacing the copper with fiber? Or are they just dropping custom?
That was one of the things I was wondering about. That's part of what's going on, is how exactly are you going to bring this forward? Right now, they were just what he was saying is Consolidated has a phased approach, and they may be, I don't know. I think that's part of what everything's going on in there, is how are we going to make sure these people that have no other means of communication, what are you going to do with them?
Well, they're regulated by the PUC, so
Right.
they would have to get authority from the PUC in order to do this. And they're by law required to be provider of last resort. So that means that they have to go to the last mile.
Right.
So how they do that, I think is up to them. But I don't think that they can leave people stranded.
No, I don't think so. They've already started, is from what.
Well, I'm wondering if they're working with the CUDs as well. So the CUDs has all this money for fiber,
Mhm.
and they're the ones that are gonna light it. I don't know. I know there's some other outfits that
Yeah.
are working, with the CUD in the Kingdom. And CUD in Lamoille County, there's, what the heck is it? It's not Xfinity, it's another one, but they're the ones that are
Fidium.
Fidium, yeah, Fidium fiber.
Yeah, I have Fidium. But that was one of the things they mentioned is, of course, if you go fiber, what happens? If the power goes out. You got nothing.
That's, yeah, years ago, when we were dealing with when we had jurisdiction over that subject, that's one of the things we always talked about as fiber started coming out, is how do you keep it lit?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
I think Comcast has some generators out there that would help keep some of their stuff going, but, you know, Comcast is a blend. They have fiber and they have, copper still, so.
Right. Yeah. And the only other thing was, the cloud computing and stuff like that. There may be some data privacy intersectionality there. That's all I got.
Anybody else, sir?
The Healthcare Committee has been taking a pretty interesting bill, H 583, having to do with financial transactions and how hospitals are organized as a corporation or whatever. And some of the, which would be very familiar with, you know, in terms of some of the stuff we deal with, but it's strictly healthcare entities. Part of it has to do with the concern about private equity and, you know, their acquisition of some of the smaller practices, that kind of thing. So really interesting stuff, you know, obviously, you know, just focused on the healthcare entities themselves. But just thought I'd bring that to your attention. And then second bill I'm following is a terrific primary care access bill. It has a real strong piece in there about workforce in terms of how to replace the some of the older practitioners, primary care docs are leaving a little before their time, kind of fed up with everything. And how do you incentivize newer folks to come in, go to medical school here, stay here, do residency, especially in rural areas.
Yes. We gotta go to the floor.
Okay.
I know Emily has something also. So when we come back, we're gonna hear about the Vermont training program. I don't think it's gonna take all that time. So then we'll come back to everyone so they can give their reports. Great, so on the floor, you're reporting today.
No,
You're not on notice yet?
No, it got pushed to approach.
it went
by
to approach,
accident.
they were confused about something.
Okay.
But-
That's
We
good.
had a long conversation, cracking down yesterday.
Yeah. Upshot is I got a good night's sleep last night,
Good,
so, you know.
Yeah, we got
I'm
a whole
cool.
weekend now to prep.
Yeah,
It's gonna-
exactly. I've already got the whole thing.
It's gonna be more than spectacular.
Now I just need to figure out how to condense it a little bit.
Yes.
Good. Okay, so let's go offline. We'll close the floor, so we'll be back here 10 minutes after